most consumers are still well served by a broad service, a wide range of programming. And so I have two questions about that, I guess. One is, those services largely exist or continue to exist because the scale of negotiating content agreements and also the scale of making people aware of it really helps, meaning that you have niches of people with niches of interest, but if you were to buy content to serve each niche separately, the economics wouldn't work. So bundling does make sense. But is there an opportunity, we saw cord cutting is happening, we saw people have narrow interests. Is there an opportunity through those services to make consumers more aware of the particular programs that they would be interested in, or the particular ways of viewing content? We hear people say, well, there's nothing to watch, or there's, I'm wasting money because there are all these channels I don't watch. It would seem like that, when you look at TV everywhere and just making people aware that that's a missed opportunity.
I think it is a missed opportunity. I think the communication of the value of the big bundle has been not great. And I also think we're in a funny inflection point, really, because we still talk about TV and pay TV versus OTT and subscription VOD services as if they're somehow differentiated in the consumer's mind, whereas I think 10 years or 20 years down the road now, nobody will remember why that distinction was so important. When I turn on my TV now, my newest one, it's got apps on it for everything, including Spectrum, and I don't really think about whether I'm using the internet or a pay TV subscription. I think about, what am I in the mood to watch right now? Yeah. So if you ask somebody like me in 10 years, what's your first source? I would just say, well, I just turn my TV on, right? And I wouldn't necessarily think about whether I'm going to, I would have to think of, like, do I go to Spectrum or do I go to Netflix or whatever? Or do I just get a whole bunch of little thumbnails up in front of me that have different programming options and I don't really know? It's kind of like when you turn your car on. Do you really know whether it's your carburetor that's helping you fire it up, or, you don't really think about all the different elements of it, of what make it go. And I think we're heading that way with video, that you're going to turn on your screen of whatever sort in the future, and you won't have so many sort of disjointed experiences.
And to your point, the operators themselves are facilitating that. When I pick up my X1 remote, I can say Stranger Things, and I'm in Netflix. So there are...
and they're smart to do that because they keep you in their ecosystem by doing that.
So Michael, if somebody's an OTT service and they want to go, let's say they are serving a niche and they feel the niche is big enough, what are the challenges in generating awareness, and how do you go direct to consumer? Do you bundle with Amazon channels, or what are the trade-offs on actually finding the subscribers and creating a compelling service and being integrated into this future where you don't know if it's the carburetor or whatever?
Right. To answer the last part first, I guess, you have to really sort of stay in sync with the technology platforms offering, like the Apple Universal Search or the Google Discovery aspects of content are becoming increasingly important, as well as sort of having a broad reach on the living room platforms that you want audience to engage with your product with. In terms of sort of starting a new niche service, I think it's obviously a very crowded, very expensive market to play in. We mentioned earlier, like, sort of the niche, not being easily economically tenable, and you can see sort of even companies at our scale are sort of associating with even larger entities like AT&T and so forth to really try to exercise that scale, even though we are already in a niche. So I guess I would say that trying to come at the market with a new niche, you hopefully have a lot of runway to facilitate that endeavor. And towards reaching the audience, I think social media, obviously, a huge part of what we do is sort of deeply engage with our, know our fans, we are our fans and that sort of thing, and really try to find them where they are and sort of have fun with sort of the brand as a persona. So one of the recent question that came up in some interview was around sort of like what is the UX of our platform? Is it tuned for our content? And I would say, yeah. I mean, it's like they're basically the same thing, right? Like how you message your users, how they the medium that they engage with has to be sort of closely aligned with your content message, especially in the niche content space.
And I'm curious, when Sherry was talking about turning on the TV in the future, do your users primarily consume content through a TV, or is it other devices? It is.
Yeah, so game consoles are really big with us. A lot of game console apps are one of our major distribution channels, and it is kind of we face that tension too, sort of like trying to communicate uniqueness and like this space is for you. At the same time that we're in this ecosystem of just making it very, very easy to quickly jump into the content or sort of disconnect the publisher from the user connection to the content. And so trying to still have a brand and identity connection to the users is also something that we work with in building very rich applications within the gaming console space.
And Rob or Roy or both, and what are you seeing in terms of making consumers aware that your services exist, and how do you see things playing out there in terms of distribution channels or other ways of making consumers aware?
As a traditional broadcaster, I get to cheat. We have the mouthpiece already, so my stations that are putting out connected devices apps are promoting them the exact same way they promoted their mobile apps when we came out with them, by pointing it out on the actual linear TV broadcast, which then also gets us into virtual MVPDs and MVPDs and gives us an opportunity to have an additional level of discovery that a lot of pure plays don't. We also push longer forms. A normal TV spot's a minute and a half. In television news, we can say, well, if you would like a deeper dive, go download this on your Roku. Or we have a hard time because we're on so many places telling them how to find the store. So the store discovery is even on top of discovery everywhere else. But otherwise, we're doing it. Our strategy right now is social posts and the actual broadcasts themselves, which is how we built our phone apps. So.
Well, we don't sell to the end consumer. We supply the content distributor. So, but what we're seeing is, price. I mean, everybody sees the economics. Hulu just announced a $430 million Q1 loss. Doubling what they had last year, and they're the number 3 player. So there's massive pressure on us to drive pricing down. All the new workflows are digital. We just shut down 2 transponders, so all the workflow even for traditional layout is going digital. We've built new hybrid workflows that can do ad insertion on an OTT platform for live events. And I had a lunch with my good friend and colleague who runs Spectrum Sports here in LA. And where before they were doing maybe 3 channels 5 years ago, they're doing over 20, and everything's just going hyper local. So yeah, I mean, the fat bundle's here today. I think 5 years from now it's going to look very different. I think the video industry is. I think Netflix has Napsterized the video industry, quite frankly, and we just haven't figured it all out yet. What's interesting to me, we just went through a great election, and I can't wait till Spectrum launches their Channel 1, which is hyper-local news. I'm sitting here in Huntington Beach. We love Airbnb, and I don't even know how the city councilors voted on it. So I think, hyper-local, hyper-focused, they're doing a great job broadcasting high school sports. So we're in the same boat. That's what we're doing. We're enabling highly flexible content that can be distributed either on demand or live at a much lower price point.
So that's a target audience or a niche audience, just niche in a different way, geographically driven.
Oh yeah, and Charter's still one of the biggest, pay TV operators in the country, but they are forced, like everybody else, to go hyper local and hyper focused. So my point is, the pay TV fat bundle will change dramatically in the next 5 years.
And you're, talking about price coming down and losses. That brings us to the topic of monetization. So what lessons learned have you all had regarding subscription versus advertising or variance? What works, what doesn't work? Where do you think the opportunities are around monetizing OTT services?
Well, I can tell you one interesting fact, which is that after Hulu launched its ad-free tier, the number of complaints they got from consumers about advertising in the ad-supported tier went down dramatically. And it wasn't because so many people switched to the ad-free, it was because people had a choice. They knew they had a choice. And the price differential, they felt, I think, was reasonable. And so they kind of had a price value decision to make, and once they had made it, they were at ease about it. And so I think that was really instructive, that consumers will tolerate advertising, and advertising is still really, really important in the video ecosystem. And when you give them a choice to watch it or not and pay more, often they will choose to watch it, which is great for everyone.
We have both AVOD and SVOD service in the same offering. We leverage a few different premium content windows and that sort of thing. Like the first episode will be ad supported, and then to finish it you may have premium, or new content. Like the newest episode of a given series will only be available in the premium with the subscription, and so we play around a lot with that and try to sort of figure out the points that really help convert our AVOD audience over to subscription. And finally, I would say that the AVOD is really the top of our funnel. Like, it's really makes the whole service much more accessible. We do a lot of work around SEO and just making sure that if anybody's searching for content, that we're one of the first places to watch it. Freely watch the content, with advertisements, but and then that we use that as sort of the base audience that we try to convert against.
So it's almost part of a marketing funnel then, if you will.
Yeah, it's definitely fundamental to our strategy, I would say.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The other thing we're seeing, I think, a lot of in this time in the industry is really, really high churn, especially on some of the more niche products. Actually, I think on the mainstream products as well. And that adds a lot of cost in for platforms and for, I don't know, I'd be super curious to know your churn on Crunchyroll. I'm sure you won't tell the audience. But I know that's a big factor, and there are lots of free trial offers out there, and I think consumers are getting pretty savvy and taking advantage of them and kind of trying a lot of different things. And I think it remains to be seen what'll kind of stick. But high churn makes it hard to monetize, because often you need a longer subscriber life in order to pay back the marketing investment. And if somebody's only coming in for 2 or 3 months, that may be a dead loss to you as a platform or a service. So that, I think, is a big issue. It hasn't been really addressed, and maybe one of the reasons why you're starting to see some of the smaller SVOD services shut down.
I think there'll be more to shut down too.
Yeah, I do too.
Not just small, just larger ones. And I'm the perfect consumer to what you just said. In fact, I use Hulu as my primary virtual MVPD, but every 6 months I'll go out and find trial offers and try everybody else and cancel the ones that don't meet my needs, which is nothing but Hulu so far. So, and that's what I just do as a consumer side point. Monetization on my side of the world is different, because we still use just pre-roll, where we don't charge. We've got some things on our roadmaps to try out, maybe some things here in LA and Chicago, but as for right now, we're still reliant on pre-roll. And I've got national salespeople just telling me get as much video out there as I can so that they can sell pre-roll. But then I'm putting a 30-second pre-roll on a 1.5-minute news story. And so we're trying to get longer form out there so we can insert mid-roll and get our views down to our time of viewing up. But I'm still getting 1.5-minute packages, so I struggle with that, and so it makes it very hard for me to ask for money to innovate, because the current product that I hate the word hamstrung, but that I'm hamstrung by isn't really a great platform for making money.
And what about the rest of you in terms of what you've seen about ad formats that work in an OTT environment? And clearly, a 30-second pre-roll, a minute and a half doesn't sound quite right. But what have you learned about what consumers will tolerate and what also will work for advertisers?
Yeah, we've been doing some experiments, sort of A/B test runs around different levels of ad load. We haven't really been able to get outside of the sort of 15-second to 30-second advertising format in the context of living room especially. We do a little bit more in the mobile context. There's a little bit more rich ecosystem of SDKs for supporting that sort of thing there. But we have started, I think it's very early days relative to sort of interactive payloads in the living room, and we have been in discussions with some companies that are doing sort of, like an interactive ad that you agree to do this interaction and then you can get the content without advertising for the duration of the episode. So there's some interesting new tech innovations in that space, but hasn't quite materialized on our commercial service yet.
So I don't understand why advertisers aren't more active in this space. To me, it feels like they are accepting a consumer proposition that they know consumers hate. Consumers do not like to be carpet bombed with 30-second spots. They just don't like it anymore. And I don't understand why more advertisers aren't insisting on innovation. So at Fox, we've done tons of innovation. We've done things like engagement ads, like Michael's talking about, where you're asked, do you want to engage with this one ad for 45 seconds, and then the rest of the program will be ad-free. So that's one format that I think is really innovative and interesting, and consumers love it. We've also experimented with very, very short ad pods. So you're talking about a 90-second pod. 90 seconds is actually pretty short. There are a lot of pods that are 2 and 3 minutes. But we've experimented with what we call Jazz, Just A and Z. So 2 spots, the first one and the last one, in the ad pod, which gives consumers more content, which they like, and fewer ads, which they also like. Now those are 30-second spots, generally speaking, and those are long-form programs I'm talking about in our linear broadcast. Obviously, if you're going to do that, it takes a lot of pre-planning because most shows are not cut for ad pods that short. 30-minute shows are usually cut for 22 minutes of programming and 8 minutes of ads. So if you're going to then shrink it and have 25 or 6 minutes of programming, obviously you need more content. So we have, there's an editing cost to doing that, right? So that's another factor to sort of think about. We've also, in some of our digital and on-demand platforms, experimented with a lot of 15-second spots. I don't know why you wouldn't run a 15 on a 60 or 90-second piece of content.
Traditional broadcast sales.
Well, exactly. So here's a big issue. Like, I don't understand why this is like craziness that consumers are telling us in every possible way they will not tolerate that much of advertising, and yet advertisers, if the advertisers were insisting, your guys would step up to the plate quick. But the advertisers are not insisting, and I don't understand that. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, really, this is great. And did you kind of push this to the advertisers, saying, "Hey, consumers don't like this. We need to more."
Yes, I think it's us leading the way as opposed to them, and it's their product people are getting sick of.
Right.
If you see 6 ads for an Audi in a 30-minute show on Hulu, you're never going to buy an Audi, right? So I don't understand why advertisers are accepting this, other than I don't know. Are they not watching TV? Is that the problem? Maybe they're all cord cutters. I don't know.
A lot of my remnant ads I'm getting in now are 15 and 10 seconds, but when my local salespeople go out and sell something, they don't want to recut the spot that already showed on TV. So then I get these 30-second ads, like we say, that upset everybody because they're a minute news story. And it's hard to get that to trickle. My national salespeople get it, but they're still hamstrung with what they can sell. The remnant ads are actually better than our national sold ads, and the local ads are,
And there's also an opportunity for what I like to think of as advertiser storytelling, especially in the digital era. I think we need people like Freewheel probably to step up and make it possible, and I'm not an expert, so I could be wrong that it doesn't exist yet. But I believe that advertisers would be very well served if they could come up with, say, like a 3-minute story that they wanted to tell to someone, but chop it up into 15 or 30-second spots, so that if I'm watching 3 episodes of a show in a row, by the time I finish the 3rd episode, I've seen that whole sequence of story. That keeps people engaged and interested, and they want to watch the ad because there's something new happening. They're not just getting the same, soak your fingers in palm olive and you'll never have dry skin over and over again, which drives everyone crazy. So I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunity here, but that the advertisers need to be the ones leading the charge. And for some reason, they're not thinking creatively about how do we reach people, given all these advances in technology.
Well, also you had to invest in your platform capabilities to be able to support that. If you're one network that can do that and the others can't, that creates a challenge for
Big
you.
element of like minimal viable product, right?
Yeah.
It's like those, you can't scale up the ad across all the places that you want to air it. It's pretty complicated to get some technology in place in all the different contexts.
It is, and all the different platforms
Yeah.
make it that much harder.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we have almost 5 minutes left here. Just thought I'd see questions. Yes, here's one.
I have a part question. One has to do with what Michael said about ad-driven viewers and converting them to subscription.
Yep.
Which suggested to me you were inferring that subscription revenue is more prized by Crunchyroll than ad revenue.
Well, yes.
Okay. So that's the first question. I just wanted to confirm that, and I'd like to understand maybe a little bit why, right? And then the second question would be, how does the industry look at churn? I understand how it works with subscription, right? But how does it work for an ad-driven platform?
Right. So when we were doing those experiments I mentioned earlier around testing ad load, we are looking at sort of customer lifetime health, right? Like we're seeing, does this user come back to the service, if they get hit with more ads or less ads and that sort of thing, towards sort of the economics of subscription versus AVOD. I mean, you're getting X dollars as per 1,000 views on a ad supported basis, and X dollars per subscriber on the subscription model. So it's just a much larger per user value to do the subscription. And then but I think it also goes back to what we were talking about earlier around sort of churn. And we don't necessarily have to look at our users as either subscribed or not. There's sort of like there's some that sort of subscribe seasonally, but then still watch content through AVOD over time. And we're trying to do our best to sort of use all that data to really engage in the users through their life cycle of subscription or not subscription to bring them back into the service, or just keep a sense of the user regardless of their subscription state.
Yes, question here.
I'd like to follow up on what Sherry was trying to make point about the distinction between traditional pay TV and OTT. I think it is blurring, and I think you were trying to say the same thing. The question is, as a content creator or a content distributor, do you actually care how the content is delivered to the end users, and do you create the content differently?
I certainly think some content does better. You could envision it's less enjoyable to watch a sporting event on a small screen versus some kind of comedy clip or something like that. So there's certainly content that's more or less optimized for a particular screen size. But in terms of the pipe that the content travels through to get to the consumer, no, we certainly don't care about that at all. Nor does the consumer, I think. But we do, right? But we do definitely create different content for different viewing kind of paradigms.
We worked really hard with our TV stations to realize that what works on broadcast doesn't work on VOD, and it doesn't work on the connected devices, and it doesn't work on YouTube. It needs to be tweaked here and there. We run so lean, it's hard to get anybody to make those tweaks, but we have been able to get them to understand that on broadcast TV, and we have studies that the anchor intro and the anchor outro and the reporter saying, I'm so-and-so, on VOD of any sort, nobody cares about that. And our drop-offs go, especially when we were trying to make money on Facebook, you had to watch it all, and we'd lose everybody because the anchors would sit there jibber-jabbering for another 15 seconds, and our numbers would just go like this. So we definitely do that differently now for anything that's not broadcast related.
Great learning. All right, well, one more question, please.
I'm coming from the software development side of the business, so I was wondering, because I know how complex and comprehensive OTT solutions today are, I was wondering how much of that are you building in-house versus trying to outsource, and if the trend is to bring more of the competency into the in-house, or still try to outsource as much as possible.
In-house versus outsourced OTT platform development.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, so Crunchyroll's been around for 10 plus years, so naturally, there wasn't a lot of OTT full-featured platforms to purchase back then. So I think, being an OTT first play from the beginning just flowed well for us to build out a pretty robust technology set, and we've sort of continued that trend even with the recent newer products like Hurd, where we're building out a fair share of the technology components that we use. We use a lot of open source, of course, so that we can scale without having to reinvent the things that have already been done. But yeah, happy to talk more about it afterwards.
Yeah, I have a comment on that. I think going back 7, 8, 9 years ago when a lot of the OTT was starting off, there's a lot of outsourcing. There's been a massive amount of insourcing by the major players, whose names I won't mention. Here we are 8 years later in the cycle, and I'm getting calls from some of my biggest clients that 5, 6 years ago decided to insource. They're now second guessing that decision, saying, hey, well, maybe we should be outsourcing again. The reinvestment you need to make in CapEx and software and new codecs and everything else just doesn't make it economically viable.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I believe we're out of time, but please join me in thanking our panelists.